All right. We should be live here. Hello, everybody.
What's going on? Hey, everyone.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. Probably kick it off with some intros.
Absolutely. Yeah. We can, I'll start with myself. So yeah, I'm Mason. I'm kind of in a DevRel space, do a lot of product at Pieces. You'll see me on Discord all the time, and big on open source. So yeah, great to be here. Robert, if you want to go.
Yeah, sure. I'm Rob. I'm an infrastructure engineer at Pieces. Just joined actually under 2 months ago. And since then, I've been working on creating a Visual Studio extension and getting that up to feature parity with all the other extensions we have out there.
The long-awaited Visual Studio extension. Jason, you want to do an intro real quick?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Jason. I'm the founder of Ohio AI Solutions. Basically working with Pieces, specifically on the Python CLI, which is something really, really exciting that I'm looking forward to talk about a little bit later. So.
Awesome. Yep. And everyone probably knows my face by now, but I'm Savo, technical co-founder and CEO at Pieces. And yeah, I mean, I work on a variety of tasks. I would say notably closing our Series A recently, but now I'm working on some stuff with the Dart compiler team to make sure the wait for execution deprecation doesn't break all of our code. So, just day-to-day tasks, right? Whatever it looks like. Absolutely.
Nice.
So Mason, do you want to kind of kick us off with just some of the outline of this? I'm happy to do so as well, but I know we're going to cover a variety of topics, primarily just around like how we build and how we can do things quickly. But you're kind of the agenda maker here.
Absolutely. So yeah, we're going to hit a variety of topics, just like Savo said, all the way from our brand new products from the Visual Studio extension that Robert will talk about later in the stream, to kind of the open source side. If we look at our SDKs and our brand new documentation site, Jason's going to hit on a really great kind of product that we've been putting a lot of man hours towards lately, our Python CLI agent. And then Savo is going to wrap the show up with our brand new Workstream pattern engine with a really nice demo. And then, of course, we'll answer your questions throughout the entire live stream. But then at the very end, we'll have an actual Q&A session. So definitely ask questions throughout, and we will get to you throughout the stream.
Yeah, and I would just add, we'll certainly cover some product stuff. I know we got 2 demos, which would be great. So Visual Studio extension, Robert's going to take us through that, and then I'll cap this off with some really insane stuff with the Workstream pattern engine, which actually goes out to the early access program this afternoon. Which has been a long press, but you'll see a 9.0 version of Pieces OS, which is awesome. So if you're not a part of the early access program, definitely reach out to us, and it's pretty cool. But the Workstream pattern engine should go out to production or public beta, I would say, in about a week and a half, 2 weeks. That said, we're also going to, probably cover some technical topics, which is just like, how do we manage our SDKs, right? How do we ship SDKs in multiple languages very quickly? What are the specifications that go into that? So protobuf specifications for gRPC, but also open API specifications for generating HTTP SDKs. And then also too, just like some techniques around like building plugins. I know, Robert, you can probably talk towards the stuff that you and Caleb do, where you leverage WebViews to kind of implement certain UIs very quickly, but then also you do the low level wiring to tap into VS Code specific, Visual Studio specific functionality. Am I missing anything else on that, Mason? I think that's pretty.
I think that is a great explanation of what we're going to talk about. Let's get into it.
All right. So I think we're going to actually kick things off. I'll do a little high level kind of just overview around, what we've been working on, what we're building, some of the goals for the year. And I'll kind of like cap that off, but I'll start on the topic of technical debt, right? Which is, you're always fighting technical debt, right? We're scaling our engineering team. I think we're probably around like 14 full-time engineers at this point, infrastructure, machine learning, product, things like that. And that's a hard thing to do, right? So how do you fight technical debt at large? It comes down to, I would say, like language isomorphism, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then it also, is spec-driven and test-driven development. I think like those 2 things are pretty key. But yeah, to talk a little bit about isomorphism, here at Pieces, one of our approaches to technical debt was, can we get as much code as possible to be written in the same language, right? Where, an engineer on the machine learning team, they might be able to pop over to the infrastructure team and solve a problem in that same language. And so I think jumping around from team to team, product to product, if you can reduce the number of languages that a developer has to actually know and kind of come up to speed on, that goes a long way, right? And so I would say, our goals for the year are how do we make Dart and Flutter more portable, right? And so how do we add new web views and functionality to our plugins that are either written in Flutter and kind of ran inside of a web view, or how do we kind of bring native functionality with Dart ahead of time compiled binaries that allow you to tap into certain functionality right inside that plugin. And so, yeah, I think isomorphism is an important thing. Same goes for, Pieces OS and OS server up in the cloud. It's can we take the components of your machine, memory, compute, and a file system? And then can we just give you that in the cloud and run that same code, again, isomorphically without having to change it too much? So that's kind of one component. Robert, if you want to jump in and talk about the work that you and Caleb have done, on the WebView technique, bringing that, scaling that inside of Visual Studio very quickly, that would be another major component to our technical debt, allowing us to keep that low and move fast.
Yeah, sure. I'll share my screen because after that I can get into the demo.
Let's go.
Let's see, share screen. Entire screen, screen 2. Is everybody seeing this?
Yep, we're looking great.
All right, so as Savo touched on, we do have multiple web views, currently one implemented in Visual Studio, which is the Pieces Copilot. So this is a shareable web view amongst all of our plugins to maintain consistency. And how that helps development is the web view itself has callbacks written in JavaScript or TypeScript in this case, which can then interface with the IDE or other extensions directly to interact with, say, the development environment. For example, this is a particular callback. Let's say I'm developing this new function right now, actually. And I'm new to the project, and I don't know what this function does. So I go down to Pieces, and I ask Copilot, hey, Copilot, what does this function do? So that callback was able to send the information to our web view, and it should be explaining what this function does. And so it helps developer productivity because as soon as I got the original Copilot web view set up, I was able to ask it questions to help develop it further, which is kind of an interesting and meta process. So it even tells you, the blame options is used for the blame operation in the libget2sharp. This is actually a preview of a feature that should be upcoming shortly, which is we'll be using Git information to extract contributors to specific files. So you'll be able to ask the Copilot about who contributed to the code, who should I be talking to understand this more, questions of that nature. And I believe our other extensions also already have that feature. So working on feature parity there.
Yeah. And Robert, I think our goal and our approach to integrations is keep the developer in that context as much as possible, right? You don't necessarily have to switch out to the browser or switch out to the desktop app to fire a question off or to save a piece or even search your pieces that you have saved to reuse them, right? And so one of the challenges there is you're familiar with Visual Studio Visual Studio functionality, Visual Studio extensions, quick actions, the way you search, the way you autocomplete, all those things that you're used to doing inside of Visual Studio. We don't want to just move all of that to a web view, that's just inside of Visual Studio. We want you to have that context menu. We want you to be able to search just inside of Visual Studio as you would anyways, and just pipe that data into Visual Studio, but then also pipe data from Visual Studio into that common web view. And so that callbacks technique right there actually allowed us to recycle that web view across Obsidian, Jupyter Hub, Visual Studio Code, and Visual Studio, but also maintain that native functionality right inside of Visual Studio. So the right-click menu, the autocomplete, the search, things like that. And so there's this unique balance of all right, what do you absolutely have to write, in Visual Studio's context, right? And in that language and everything like that. And then what can we recycle? And I think we're always like pushing that balance to where it's like, can we move more into a recyclable component like that WebView? But then also too, like, where can we go really, really deep on the Visual Studio functionality, the Visual Studio APIs? And so that's kind of a unique example where about a month ago, we didn't have a Visual Studio plugin at all. And you've wired up all of that native functionality. You've kind of combined it with the WebView. And now we've got a pretty robust product that's rapidly approaching kind of feature parity with the other plugins. We'll continue to take this a step further. I would say like one of the things, for example, Jason, if you click the large language model selection inside of your Copilot there, you'll note like we have these large language models from the cloud. Then you also have those on-device large language models. So you can run a local one if your code is, ultra secure, or, you have IP concerns. You can still leverage Copilots locally. So obviously that's a good bit of native functionality. We want that to be hardware accelerated. We want that to run on device and so on. And so we're taking components of Pieces OS and we're saying like, how much do we need to have centralized inside of Pieces OS on the server? But also, can we get native, functionality right inside of the Visual Studio plugin? And so, for example, in Visual Studio Code, you can use a node process to execute a binary locally, and that binary is written in Dart and can call native functionality. It can host a model, it can do all that. And it can serve it back over gRPC or HTTP to that WebView. And so one of the things that we're looking to do later in the year is bring like more kind of modular and portable native functionality that was written in Dart, compiled into an ahead of time executable, and then shipped right alongside those plugins to give you native functionality, Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio functionality, and then common kind of interfaces like the WebView there. So a lot going on, but our goal is how do we just make this as modular and recyclable across products as possible?
Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of good points, especially one if we want you to stay in your development context, right, within Visual Studio. To that end, we actually do have a couple of enhancements listed out to be improved on. So Visual Studio itself has a snippet feature, and one of the upcoming things we've have on a roadmap is to be able to insert snippets that you've already saved in Pieces using Visual Studio's snippet feature. Such that you can use what you're already used to that Visual Studio has. And just for an example of something I've actually used in Pieces that would fit that bill is I asked it before, well, how do I access a document in Visual Studio because I'm creating this function. So I am So this is something I've actually used during development, and typically it'll answer the question here, and then I can ask it to generate some code, or it does automatically in certain cases. So in this case, this is something I've actually accessed it before, and once it's done generating here, excuse me, I can actually take this snippet and insert it right into my class. So that snippet can be then modified to your liking. Point being, though, is that you can save these snippets for future use. Yeah. And then you can insert them whenever you need them by searching Pieces. So that's the current status of the plugin.
Yeah, and I was just gonna add there, like that's pretty awesome. Yeah, you've got your saved materials list right there, where you're finding things, you're opening them up, you're reusing them. I think that was just a really great example of the fluidity between like that modular WebView, sending data to it, having the context of your Visual Studio editor, and then also too just piping data back from the WebView into Visual Studio. Right. And so that's our goal is not to replace the tools that you're using. Our goal is to enhance them and glue them together with other components of your work stream. So, for example, the Copilot here, and we'll demo this at the end of the call, but it'll have context of like what you're researching in the browser to like solve this or implement a class or whatever else. And then the context of your current Visual Studio instance. Right. And so can we unify those contexts to give you the best answers to kind of like move you along faster and make sure that, you know, our Copilot understands where you're at in your work in progress journey. So pretty exciting there, you know, and I would say a lot goes into this. You know, maybe that's a good segue into some of the SDKs, which is like, all right, we have SDKs across multiple languages. But Robert, will you quickly touch on how we generated this SDK so that we can call, you know, certain functionality on Pieces OS directly from Visual Studio?
Yeah, sure thing. So as Savo touched on before, we use an open API generator. So we have specification files. I believe a few of these generated SDKs are open source at the moment. We plan on open sourcing more. But the gist of it is, since their specification files are already available, new languages are as simply as running the generator. I say simply because some cases they do have to be manually tweaked after they're generated, but it is really easy to get up and running. And once you've generated it the first time, the updates to the SDK are updates to the spec file, hit enter, and you're done. And so that was really helpful when first joining Pieces and having to interact with I don't have to write everything in C#. I can just hit this button and be done with it. That saved a good weeks of work. So kudos to the Open API Generator CLI team. Yeah, that's how we're able to do it.
And I mean, I'll touch on this briefly, but I've been in the weeds with Open API lately. I think I'm even a contributor now. Getting their TypeScript docs to generate was quite a fun time. But I mean, yeah. So Open API, it's essentially at the very, very bare bones. If you're not familiar with it, you have a spec file that kind of outlines your entire API, from endpoints to response types to requests to the parameters that you pass into everything. And then it's a standardized file then that you're able to take and generate either SDKs like we do for this. And then also we're also able to generate our documentation straight from that as well. And I mean, Salva, did you want to hit on this, or I'll just jump right in?
No, yeah, I think it's a great segue into what we're going to cover on some of the documentation stuff and the work we've done there. But I was just going to say, like, you know, spec-driven development and test-driven development, you know, has been at our core since day one. We knew that, you know, we have this long-term vision where the functionality inside of Pieces OS is pretty insane, right? It's pretty world-class. Like the ability for it to understand your context, to save things, to serve those back. Even like hosting a large language model, you can build an entire product on a couple of Pieces OS endpoints, right? And, you know, we kind of think about it like this, right? It's a vertical model where, you know, we build products on top of Pieces OS and our partners build products on top of Pieces OS. So like you're inside of an org, that org wants to do an integration with your centralized Pieces OS. We have a whole bunch of SDKs for them, right? And then lastly, we see a world where anyone can build products on Pieces OS. And this kind of like brand arc of Pieces OS is like, Pieces OS will eventually become Runtime. So runtime.dev, runtime.ai, like those are two of our brands that it will naturally grow into. And you can imagine like similar where it's powered by Android, it's powered by Runtime, right? And the beauty of it is like you can build a product on Pieces OS and or Runtime, right? Whatever you want to refer to, across Mac OS, Linux, and Windows. And you're going to get hardware accelerated LLMs, right? You're going to get storage capabilities and search capabilities. And I think that's a really powerful thing. So we knew that was where it was going. And we knew that to do that, we have to do spec-driven development, right? You have a spec, you can kick out some SDKs, you can do some adjustments if needed. We actually have a custom Dart generator. And I know Robert had to battle some C# versions, I think it was. Is that right, Robert? Yeah. And so, you know, there's some challenges, but again, reducing technical debt. So Open API was previously Swagger, right? It's the same thing, but everyone in the company looks at it from the same exact perspective. Like here are your models, here are your inputs, your outputs and your inputs, your responses, things like that. And that really helps everyone stay on the same page. But it also allows us to move very quickly into supporting community functionality integrated right on top of it. I'll say we're taking the same exact approach, a similar approach to gRPC. So this is something that's very commonplace at Google, which is you have a protobuf specification, which is built on HTTP2. And gRPC is basically doing protobuf streams where it's actually about 10 times more performant than HTTP. And it allows you to have, you know, half duplex streams and full duplex streams just moving data across the wire, right? And so we actually use that as a mechanism to connect to the cloud and have high performance communication there, streaming your LLM responses in, streaming uploads and downloads of larger objects, like, for example, the context of a code base. We can do that. But then similarly too, like if you have two AOT binaries that are running in separate threads, separate processes, can they communicate over gRPC, right? And so when you think about isomorphism, that might be two separate servers in the cloud that are communicating over the same infrastructure, right? So whether it's two separate processor cores on your computer or it's two separate servers in the cloud, that comms link is exactly the same, and it's very efficient. So that's where we're going with a lot of this stuff. Is we'll start to see a major proliferation of our protobuf SDKs in addition to our HTTP SDKs. And there's a whole world of taking your current HTTP API and that specification, and then basically converting that to protobufs, which we got a lot of work done on it as well. So we don't have to rewrite the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, pretty awesome stuff there. Thank you, Robert, for showing some of that. Anything else you wanna cap off on?
No, I think you did a good job of summarizing that. Yeah.
Awesome. Mason, you want to take us into some of our SDK docs real quick and show people some of the great work you've been doing?
Absolutely. Let's do it. And I know you mentioned we have our own Dart template. We now have our own Python, TypeScript, and Kotlin, or not Kotlin yet, but yeah, we're trying to have our own custom solution as much as possible. But let me share my screen here. And let's get this shared. We should be looking good here. So yeah, essentially this is, let me get out of here a little bit, but yeah, so this is Build with Pieces. It'll be coming to the docs site very soon. But you can think of this as your just landing page for anything around trying to build on top of, like Sava was mentioning, this Pieces OS kind of runtime platform that we have running on device. So right now we support 4 SDKs. We have documentation for 4 SDKs. We can support any SDK you want. I know we've generated Lua, C#. I mean, we can do just about anything. But for now, we're gonna jump into TypeScript just to show off some of these generated docs that we've taken from that open API spec. So essentially, when you get into this TypeScript, you're going to be hit with this kind of getting started page. It's pretty standard for any SDK or API that you're getting into. You're going to have some type of authentication or getting started page just to get you to that first kind of endpoint or that request, just so you get a feel for how things work. So like we've mentioned a lot, Pieces OS is a requirement. And just having that installed you can do it on Windows, Mac OS, Linux, but having that installed will allow you to use, all of our products, but then of course, you can build on top of it as well. So, getting started, we have this really simple, kind of example where we're importing pieces from the Pieces OS client. And then we're actually, an interesting note about Pieces OS. So it does run on different ports based on your operating system. So if you are building on Pieces OS, it is important to take that into account. And we just have a simple conditional statement here. If it's Mac OS or Windows, it's on port 1000. If it's on Linux, it's port 5323. And then we just pass that in right into our configuration and we're ready to go. We can create an instance of what's known as our well-known API. This is just a great ping that you can go to see if the Pieces OS server is up and running. You can also get the version from this as well. And we'll jump into docs of this right after just to show what we're getting to there. But super simple. We have a promise here, get the health, and then we're just going to log it and run it. And it should return that okay. And the next steps, obviously, we want you to build more interesting projects than just, pinging our well-known. So we're going to jump into our APIs here. And let's actually just go to our well-known. So this is our well-known API. Like I mentioned, we have this get well-known health and get well-known version method of our well-known API. And super simple. We had that. It's almost the exact same example. It just doesn't have that conditional logic for your operating system. But what's really nice about this is you can go here now, instead of kind of blindly trying to figure out our SDK, you hop onto our docs and you can see that, it doesn't require any parameters, and you can know what the string type is, without having to command click a million times into all of the different APIs and classes in your node modules. You can just go straight to the source of truth on our docs page, and even get different status codes that you would expect. And this is really nice, especially when you get into the kind of more complex requests. So let's say we're going to go to our assets API, and so you can see we have all of our methods here, and you can see if they're post or get. And even on the bottom, we have our WebSocket connections, which are important to note, because if you try to run a GET request on that, it will fail. But let's just jump into our assets snapshot. So this is essentially, you can think of a snapshot as obviously just a snapshot in a moment of time of your pieces database, if you will. So super simple. You create a new API instance of that assets API, and this is actually not too bad of an example. We can work on the body examples a little bit more. However, it's a great way if you just go down to parameters. This is the real kind of a meat of the API docs.
Yeah,
so you're able to see these parameters. You get a really nice description of what they actually are, if they're optional, and what their type is. And then even better is you get the return type. So we can click into this, and this will take us to the actual model of the return type, and we know exactly what to expect here. And then of course you can click in and over and over. We get to the asset. So there's just so much more capability that this unlocks, rather than kind of having to guess and navigate this massive API, because it is quite a large SDK and it can be overwhelming when you jump in. But we're really excited to get this out. And I did want to hit on a few points around our I know we've been talking about Open API spec. So let me see if I can change my screen here real quick. Hopefully that wasn't too overwhelming of a demo.
Hey, those look like some good docs to me.
Yeah.
I like that for sure.
Sweet. So yeah, I'll share my entire screen here. So we're in our documentation kind of repo right now, which is open source. You can go check it out. We have it running locally. And the amazing thing here is that hopefully it isn't too small, but we can go into build, and essentially it's very simple for us to take from our Open API spec, obviously run it through that Open API generator. And this is this is all open source. So you can see all of this. And it's really nice to have that ability to generate all of these. So let's say you'll see right here, don't see your favorite language. Let me zoom this in a bit. Don't see your favorite language, let us know. And it's very easy and scalable for us on our end to support a massive amount of SDKs because it's all the same process. And I've even built out just some Python scripts, because I definitely ran into the issue where we had, obviously we run our documentation site on the DocuSource framework managed by Facebook, Meta now, but Markdown is very specific about how it wants to generate. And there's tons of different things that we do in this file alone just to clean it up. We restructure some of the directories. We fix up links, we fix up variables, just to make it look as nice as possible. But then we get to the point where this is super scalable. Like I was saying, we can do this with any language, any SDK. And that also means that we can support, if a community member comes to me and say, they want to build a NeoVim plugin, but they need Lua. We can support Lua SDK. And that goes to any application, no matter, I think there may be some ability not to support some of the languages, but almost every single language is able to be supported. However, yeah, this just shows the ability that we can build any application now, and a community member can come to me and say, I want to build on this application, but I need this language. And maybe we support that a one-off time. And then as those keep building up and those requests keep coming, we then officially support it. But this is just super exciting to me. This build with pieces kind of motto. And we're going to see some really amazing projects come out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, let me go ahead and just kind of touch on real quick, and then we'll get into Jason, who actually built on the Python SDK.
Yeah.
Let me touch on one of the reasons why we believe that Pieces OS is part of the kind of like value add in this whole open source effort, right? So a couple of things. Out the gate, we're building tools for developers, right? And we knew that developer materials are sensitive, right? They have API keys in them, they have secrets, right? They have proprietary code, they have all this stuff that is sensitive, right? And then also too, like, if you want to bring this type of product into an environment like the DoD or a banking environment or something like that, like the security requirements there are quite, extensive. And so we took an offline approach first, right? Which is, hey, if you want to verify that your data is local, like you call localhost 1000/assets, and you're going to get a snapshot of all your assets right there, right? Your processing, right? If you want to verify these LLMs are running on device, there's a whole endpoint, all the models for local LLMs, right? And so, one of the things is like, all right, let's start on device first. Then the second thing is like this API will be effectively the same whether you're running Pieces OS locally or you're running it in a container in the cloud, right? So these are just HTTP endpoints. And then the other consideration there is that there's a lot of like really nuanced stuff that we have to do on a per platform basis, right? So like hardware acceleration of LLMs on Mac OS is one problem. And then doing that on Linux and then on Windows is a whole nother problem, right? And so part of what Pieces OS does is it unifies the kind of surface area of this functionality, right? Where the endpoint is the same, whether you're using, TypeScript or Rust or Java, but it's also the same whether you're building on Mac OS, Linux, or Windows. So that means that your product is inherently portable, right? And so, you can build a Chrome plugin that leverages on-device, machine learning or on-device functionality, on-device storage, just by calling a TypeScript HTTP endpoint. And I would add the other thing about Pieces OS that's really awesome. If you look at the unique features that we have inside of our desktop app or our IDE plugins and things like that, is that the way we store your data is it's not necessarily just storing it, right? It's storing it and it's enriching it and it's creating relationships to other data inside that database. So when you get that asset back, you'll see it's connected to links, it's connected to hints, it's connected to people, and it's really a graph of this data and how it relates to the other objects. So it's not only like a database, it's a really smart database. You put a snippet in, and then all of a sudden it's enriched with tags, titles, people, links, everything, right? And then you get that back and you're like, wow, I didn't have to do any of that. And now I have a really world-class UI. And then inside of your UI, if you're looking at a snippet and you're like, hey, I want to quickly access the related links, well, it's on that asset, right? That payload is already attached. It's already, cross-pollinated for you. And it allows you to just build amazing product as opposed to worrying about the data structure, the enrichment, the graphical kind of relationships between data points. And that's a big win of Pieces OS, right? That's like a whole bunch of hardcore data science, engineering, machine learning packed into a beautiful endpoint. So wanted to touch on that too. Robert, were you going to say something there, or Jason?
You did.
I was going to say, if you'd like to verify that the offline approach is first, you could always take it on a plane and then turn the Wi-Fi off. It'll still keep working for you.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also just wanted to hit on when you're thinking about like enriching and the ability to just easy kind of like save and forget, if you will, you can also think of Pieces as just a regular database. You can store anything in there. If you're looking at it from the SDK side, you can build to-do apps. You can build it. Once you start getting into the SDK and you realize, wait, I can just ping these endpoints. I can ask questions. I can create. I can bring down local models. I can save assets. I can get snapshots. I can enrich any resource that I give it, your kind of mind kind of explodes. Obviously, Pieces is really good in the technical languages in code. However, you can absolutely give it anything and it'll enrich it, and you can use it as a database at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah, and to your point there, Mason, like when you look at the API docs that you had, it wasn't snippet and snippets and like it was asset format, fragments, things like that, right? And so you could save a file to Pieces, you could save a fragment of a file. And again, this comes into intentionality, right? When you think about like applications in the future built by our partners or built by the community and powered by runtime or powered by Pieces OS as it is today, they're going to be saving all types of things, right? And so we didn't want to kind of pigeonhole ourselves into a particular material type. It's a very generic like data structure, asset, format, version, fragment, file, like all of that's packed in. And that also, aligns with our long-term vision, which is, product one, market one is Pieces for developers, right? But then you look at, okay, I'm saving things from my clipboard. I'm saving things that I'm copying and pasting. I'm saving things that I want to reuse. Well, designers do that, right? Animators do that. Audio engineers do that, where I want to copy and paste and save to Pieces a single artboard out of an entire design project, just as you save a single snippet out of an entire, repository, excuse me. Or if you're, a knowledge worker, you're like, hey, I want to save a single PowerPoint slide out of this entire deck, right? So Pieces is designed around file fragments, and that's the name, right? Pieces. It's a piece of a whole. So really excited about, what all that means and where we're going. But I would say too, it's not only about storing data, it's about the connections between data, the enrichment of it. And then of course, layering on the machine learning to allow it to just work for you in ways that it hasn't, before. Right. So good stuff there. All right. So we've got the SDK. We did the demo there. We did some Visual Studio code, Visual Studio stuff. I'm going to have a hard time VS Code every time.
That's right.
I think we got some Python stuff to talk about. So Jason, thanks for bearing with us here, but I know you do a lot of developer advocacy. You're big on the machine learning side of the world, and you're of course like a big Python guy. Tell us a little bit about what you built recently, as an open source contributor, and how was it like using the SDKs, the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Sure, yeah. And first of all, thanks for having me on. But it's kind of echoing the whole spirit of building on top of the Pieces OS. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly of what the framework is. There's so much that you can do with it. It's like you said, it is daunting, but we started building this Pieces CLI project, which I'm going to share my screen real quick.
Awesome.
We love demos.
Yes.
Yep.
And I'll start here. Actually, is that this is fully open source. So if you're watching and you really want to contribute, we already have one contributor, which I want to shout out immediately, Bashoy, who's just been awesome. I mean, he's took the original MVP and really started running with it and really contributing in a meaningful way. But this is something where as a developer, you understand how important it is to use a CLI tool, how much time you save doing things directly from the command line. So this is taking all the power of Pieces, and which has an awesome user interface, GUI, that kind of stuff. But like being able to put in the command line and really access it from any command line tool you use really adds a lot of power to it. So this is like one layer on top of the OS, where if you would normally do things inside your VS Code, you can still do things obviously at the command line level there, but you can also just open up Anaconda or whatever you use and directly save an asset with a couple keystrokes. So this is the actual repo. So I'm not sure if I post this in the actual.
Yeah, I already got it, Jason.
Oh, you already got it? Cool. So yeah, if you want to contribute here, definitely we could. We're welcoming anyone who wants to contribute. Just a quick demo, just kind of showing it off a little bit. There's two different ways to use it. So you can directly use it from the command line, as I said. It will be a little bit slower because you have to, we have to run checks making sure that Pieces is installed in your system, that it's open, it's operational, that kind of stuff. But the other option is to just run it in a loop, which right here is what I have. I've done the run command. And from here, you can basically just run any of our normal commands, which I'll just show you real quick. If I type help, you can see very, very snappy as opposed to having to wait each time. But you can list all your assets. You can open assets. You can create new assets, delete assets. And you also have access directly to large language model, be it GPT, a GPT model or a local model, which we are still building functionality around that. We default to GPT 3.5 currently, but this is a very early project. So as things evolve, this will get more robust. You can also search. So things like if you want to use like a neural code search or a full text search, you can do that specifically from the command line. So if you're looking for something, like a lot of times I do a lot of stuff with agents and with just using LLMs in general. So I don't like having to constantly, if I'm using GPT-4 or something, I don't like having to constantly rewrite the same code. So I can just call it up. Now with this, I just kind of created a test account, but if I just list my assets here, you'll see I just have one simple test one immediately pops up. I can, everything from here, it's like, it's a pretty basic CLI. So if I just type 1, it's going to technically open this, which is pretty cool. I can click on this and it's going to open. Like I said, this is just a text snippet. So it says this is a test up here, but I can, what we're currently building in is that you can edit this, save it, that kind of stuff. But you can see how quickly you can access this, especially if you're from your command line or if you just have this running in VS Code or whatever. You can recall stuff a lot quicker than having to go to, open up your Pieces OS. There's also things in here which I don't have in this version, but are currently, in PRs waiting to be added, which are, you can go through past conversations you've had with the AI, with AI models. You can do auto commits so that you don't have to do like, the big long process of staging and all that stuff through normal Git commands. You can just basically say, throw in one command and it does it all. But yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite things though is like, so for instance, if I just say Pieces is awesome in a completely different, notepad or whatever, anything that you copy. So if I copy this to my clipboard and then I just say create, it's going to ask me if I want to take whatever I just copied to my clipboard and create it as an asset. So I can say yes, it's saving it. And then if I want to open it, I can just literally type open since it's the last asset that was created. And now we have that. If I do the same thing I did before, now I got Pieces is awesome open in a completely different window here. So obviously these are basic examples. If you have code snippets that you use all the time, this is something where you can get to it really quick. And then we'll also add in the functionality and things like that on the roadmap for images, like mentioned earlier, if you have like one PowerPoint slide or something like that, those kinds of things will come down the line, and we would love contributions there. Where I get really excited is the the agentic kind of stuff. So I'm going to stop sharing real quick so I can go back over to my agenda. But yeah, so the I will be releasing a blog actually through Pieces pretty soon about agentic AI, which is pretty exciting. I get, if you are interested in agents, we'd really love some help on that side, just because if you follow AI at all, you probably have heard of things like Devin, you've heard of AutoGen, all of these frameworks that are popping out that would really love to see that kind of thing built on top of Pieces, where now it's fully local, it's super fast, with these models running locally, and the kinds of things that we'll be able to do where it's fully air gapped. There's no, you don't have to worry about security issues. And then ideally, since it is a database on your local computer, you can limit hallucinations, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, any initial thoughts there, Mason, Savo?
It's awesome. I will tell you that, right? And again, like, on this like ambitious like effort towards getting Pieces wherever you are, right? Like if you're in your terminal, if you're in your IDE, if you're in the desktop app, wherever you are, right? Like having that functionality is pretty insane. Jason, actually, if you want to do something, you want to do a quick demo for me. I think I wanted to highlight one thing that is going on behind the scenes. So if you want to share your screen and copy and save a Python snippet, like from your like main py file or something like that, and just paste it into your notes app first. Yeah, so check this out. I wanted to highlight this for some people. So if Jason comes in here and he selects some stuff, maybe like, I don't know, that top bit of code, and you go over to so you can copy it like that. Maybe Jason paste into your notes app and then copy it from your notes, just to kind of show like what's going on here. So we've got this like thing, and it's not highlighted. It doesn't know, what it is, just a text file. If Jason like copies this, right, and he creates a snippet from it. So, yep, boom. And then
I had already done that.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So, yep. And then you go ahead and create that. So it's going to create that. And then now you can go ahead and use the open command to do that. And we pop that open. You'll note it's already classified as a Python snippet, right? It opened in a .py file versus like in the other one where it said, pieces is awesome. And by the way, it's giving it a title, right? It says pieces CLI error, right? And then it says awesome pieces awesome. It classified that as .text, right? Like latex. And that was a hard one because it's just like very, very plain text and there wasn't a lot of words. But, that's just, I just wanted to do that real quick to highlight like the actual enrichment that's going on behind the scenes. When you save something, it's getting deeply enriched, right? And you can show the tags, the links, everything else associated with it. And that happened pretty quickly, right? Running on your device there. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, that's my favorite part is the speed. I mean, that's when you're trying to, when your workflow is constantly going back and forth between things, it's like, that's the problem that Pieces solves anyway, but now we're just speeding it up even more.
Yep. Awesome. Well, I know we got maybe like 13 minutes or so here. Is that right, Mason?
That's about right. Yeah, give or take.
All right, fantastic. So I'll do a live demo of some stuff that is like very, very bleeding edge. And so I know we've been trying to get this release out. I'll go ahead and share my screen. But what we're going to talk about is the Workstream pattern engine. And I want to preface that with, there were a couple of phases that we knew would be sequential, but were really, really hard to get to, right? And so phase one of Pieces was, can I have a place as a human to save things, right? And can that place enrich them for me, title them, tag them, do all the work that I don't want to do to stay organized? Like, can we do that for you? And so that was that thing that Mason was talking about earlier, like just a nice fire and forget, right? Save it, have it for later, whatever. But the challenge there, and this is trying to solve the problem that developers run into where, like, oftentimes as a developer, you don't realize you should have saved something until you realize like you didn't save it. And that's a muscle that you have to build where, you don't want to go back to this project a little while later and be like, hey, I didn't save any of the documentation I looked at. I didn't save any of the snippets. I don't know who I talked to about this. It was a couple months ago. And now you're back at square one, right? You're getting back into it. And so, we got through phase two, which is, you want to be able to generate and you want to be able to ask, questions about the things you have saved. And that generative process actually drives more saving, right? Where you're asking a question, it's not going to give you the response you want. You tune your question a little bit. And then finally you have a code snippet where you want to insert it at caret or you want to save it for later. And so that was phase two, where it's like, okay, I'm building on phase one, humans saving something to Pieces. Phase two is intelligent systems are aware of that, can generate new things in that context, your language, your style with your Workstream kind of context associated. And that's generate, iterate, and curate. But now we're on phase three. Phase three directly solves that problem of forgetting to save something or not knowing what's important to save as you progress through your work in progress journey, right? In the browser, all your tabs open, in your IDE, all your projects open, things like that. And of course, in GChat or Slack or Teams, where you're collaborating, you're going back and forth. And so we built over the past year something called a Workstream pattern engine, which shadows your Workstream, right? What you're doing in the browser, IDE, and collaborative space. It triangulates what's actually related, right? What's a consistent theme. And then it identifies like, oh, this is important. We're going to need to save this for you. And so in capturing and saving that context, right, says, hey, we identified this is important. We're going to capture it, summarize it, save it, and have it for you. Now we can leverage that to ground the Copilot in real-time context without you doing anything. But then for phase 4, we'll be able to use that context and those things that are saved to say, what am I currently looking at? And can we give you in like a feed or a heads up display, like the links that are also associated, people to talk to about it, Copilot chats that are relevant, files to open, things like that. And all of that starts with the system being aware of what you're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and demo one of the early versions of Workstream Copilot or Workstream Pattern Engine to provide what's called temporal groundings to the Copilot. Your Copilot understands what you were doing over a certain span of time and when, to give you the ability to ask questions that feel like magic. But before I share my screen, anything to add to that, Jason, Mason, Robert?
It's an amazing technology. I think even just testing it internally, I'm blown away every single time I use it. I'm like, how is this working? I mean, shout out to our machine learning team, our infrastructure team. They have been working on this, like Savo said, for quite a while. And it's kind of the work in the background that goes unappreciated until moments like these, where we get to kind of bring it, put some UI behind it and show people how it actually works. So it is amazing, truly.
Let me go ahead and we'll take the last bit of time here to maybe answer some questions if there's any, and also do this demo. But let me share my screen, and I'll be sharing my entire screen. So we're going to go ahead and kind of kick this off. I've got pieces in the background running here, right? And sorry for the infinite display. Go ahead and minimize this tab. Minimize. Nice. Cool. And I've just got like all my tabs open from yesterday. I've got my IDE open. I was working on some native named locks, things like that. I've got some unit tests that are going on and so on. And then, of course, I have pieces running in the background. So let me go ahead and show everyone what this looks like. Of course, to access this right now, you need to be a part of the early access program. Super easy to join that. Just reach out to us. We'll get you on the list. This will go out to general availability in a beta capacity in a couple weeks, probably like a week and a half, 2 weeks max. So here I am. I'm logged in. I'll jump back to pieces here, and we'll pull this up. So you've got my program. If you're in the early access program, you'll see like a little kind of badge that shows you, this is what's going on. And I'll go ahead and show you some of the things here. But most notably, I want to turn on the Workstream pattern engine, right? And this is how this is happening in real time, is this thing was not on until I signed in, and I'm turning it on here. So we're going to go ahead and turn that on. And you'll note when you go over to your Copilot chats, we have this pipeline, right, which is generally discuss recent work. So I'll go ahead and open that, and that context is set. Everything's good to go. And I'm just going to navigate around here a little bit through my Workstream. So we have this agenda, this AMA live stream. We've got myself as a speaker. We've got, some topics here. All right, that's super interesting. We've got, Robert's going to be kind of roughly talking between this time. And I'm highlighting these details to show people, the level of kind of data that this stuff is picking up on. So right here, we've kind of gone through this, and then I'll just jump back over to the Pieces Copilot. And again, live demo here. So, hopefully we're good, but I'll say, tell me about the AMA agenda this morning. I'll just say that. And that's a pretty vague question, right? Like you're like, we had an AMA this morning. How on earth would OpenAI know that? So here we are. The AMA, Ask Me Everything, is basically April 17th, 2024, opening remarks. We've got some of this data. Knows that I'm the speaker. We're talking about the Visual Studio extension and so on. This is truly insane, like to be completely honest. I'll show you another demo, but you can understand the horizontal nature of this, right? And how this would look for pieces for knowledge workers. It's pretty powerful. I didn't have to set the context. I didn't have to set local folders. I didn't have to paste anything. It just understood it. And it's giving me like really nice follow-up questions. Like, what are the current Visual Studio features impacting developer productivity? But I'll continue the demo here. And I'll jump over to my IDE, and I'll go ahead and I'll throw an error in something. So let me go ahead and pull this up. We've got this guard here, and I'll just go ahead and throw this exception. Let's just do exception, and we'll say this is an exception that is a test for the Workstream pattern. Great. And I'm going to throw that exception, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run my unit tests for this. So I'll come up here, I'll go ahead and run this, and we'll jump over to the unit tests, and we should get a exception. Awesome. Okay, so the Guardian status is false. We've got a Unix semaphore, which is natively bound to these pointers. These are all unique pointers, etc. And we've got this exception, right? So this is specifically for the Workstream pattern engine. We've got some file paths here and so on. So I'll take a look at all that. Okay, great. Now I'm just going to jump over to my Workstream Copilot, and I'll say, tell me about the error I just got in IntelliJ. Super vague question again, right? And it's going to do some thinking. A lot of pretty crazy stuff going on. And right here, it says, this is an exception that is a test for the Workstream pattern engine. You know, here's what's going on with it. And that's nuts, right? Like even with ChatGPT today or something like that, like you're going to have to go over, you're going to have to select this whole error, right? Whatever it is, you're going to have to copy it. You're going to have to copy the code that was relevant to it, and you're going to have to put that in. And I'll say, you know, right here, we've got this testing named blocks, and let's see if I can have it tell me what part of the code might be, you know, a problem here. So let's jump over, and I'll say, what is the name of the function that threw the error? And or where is that function located? / where is the error? Right. And this is just an example, right? Like in my IDE, I might click that file path and I might go take a look. But I'm just trying to demonstrate that Pieces is aware of not only the problem that I got, but also too, like what's going on. And it got it perfectly. Like this just blows my mind, right? It says like native semaphore.guard. This is located in this file, in this project, at this file path at line 153. The error is part of this test for Workstream pattern. Absolutely insane. And so what code do I need to fix it?
Yeah, this is insane.
This is insane. Yeah, these are super vague questions, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, this is doing this with no integrations. This is straight up Pieces OS, and this is on device. I don't have an IntelliJ integration here. I don't have, you know, any specific stuff going on. This is just, you know, basically just picking up on my Workstream. So let's see here.
I love how it's telling you it intentionally thrown in. It's like, oh, you want to fix it? Don't do that.
Yeah, I know. It's just a little witty, So how can I catch the exception and print it to the console? So what I'm trying to do here is I'm actually trying to you know, test it to see if it's going to pick up on the language. Yep, right there. It says print it to the console in your Dart code, try catch block. Here's a general example of how you can catch it. And let's see if it gives me that exception that I am throwing in my example. Okay. So it gave me a generic one, risky operation, whatever else. And I'll say, can you use the example or can you use the specific exception in the example? And this thing is just churning away.
Was that second one more?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So yeah, that's exactly right. It knows that I'm throwing the native semaphore guard, and it says like try and wrap your guard in this isolate entry point, like with a try catch here.
Yep.
So yep, and it says E2 string, and it says like, you know, this is an exception test, and it's going to try and print that, you know, to the console, right? If it's that, it's going to print this. Otherwise, it's going to print something else, an unexpected exception. So this is just like a really powerful way, you know, to just naturally interact with your Copilot, right? And what you're doing, Pieces is identifying like if it's related, if it's not related, etc. Here I am on the GitHub issues, and I can say, you know, let's see what GitHub issues are potentially related to this. And it's just going to have that context.
Yeah. And this kind of goes into just how it's far more scalable as well. So we don't have to support, you know, obviously we do support Chrome, but you can turn off all of your plugins and this works totally fine.
That's exactly right. So right here, persistent identifiers and cleanup on boot, issue number 10, opened yesterday by myself. Absolutely insane. And I'll say right now, this is just plain text, but we know these people, right? Like this is my GitHub name. That'll be clickable in the future, right?
Yep.
We know what link you're on right here. Issues, you know, we can basically start to enrich this data as this Workstream Copilot or Workstream pattern engine becomes like a lot more granular, where these will all be clickable, actually, you know, actually routing you to that location as opposed to just plain text, right? So it could be file paths, it could be, you know, website links, it could be related people, and so on. So that's a quick demo. Pretty insane there. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen, but very, very excited about what we're doing. And you can see the implications are pretty profound.
Yeah, it blows my mind every single time I use it. And it just props to the team. I mean, the demos, when you get to the point where the demo speaks for yourself, you're doing something right. So
yeah, it's a wizardry, I call it.
Yeah, it is wizardry. That's exactly right. Jason, what do you think about that? That's pretty. Is that your first time seeing it?
That's wild. Yeah, that's the first time I've seen that. I was actually wondering, is that a do you have to have the windows open, or like I noticed it said it saw something from yesterday. So like, can the things be closed and it still knows?
Yeah, so the Workstream pattern engine is designed to, again, shadow you across your workflow, right? What you're doing in the browser, IDE, collaborative environments. And it's doing this, like, by the way, you can do this online. By the end of the quarter, the entire end-to-end system will be on device, which is pretty insane, to be honest. But what I was going to add is it understands temporal grounding, temporal context to any certain point in the past, right? So if I'm using Pieces and I have it up and running, like it's indexing every day, every month, every year, right? Whatever else. And I can go to it and I can say, who were all the Series A investors that I talked to in the last quarter, right? And it'll say like, you know, here's this email, here's this person, here's their contact, here's what you talked about, et cetera. And you can really drill down on that. We will have the ability for you to scope it. So you can say, I want you to only, you know, understand the last week or yesterday or whatever else. But it's pretty insane because, you know, you pick up where you left off. You said, what were the nuances that I had trouble with on this project last year when I was working on it, right? And it says, you talked to this person about this, you reviewed these documentation sites, and you ran into these errors. If you run into them again, here's how you solved them, that type of thing. Yeah.
Exciting.
Super exciting.
Yeah, that's amazing. As far as kind of timeline goes, we'll probably wrap it up here in the next few minutes. Questions goes, if you have any questions, make sure to send them in the chat. We do have, I mean, we can hit on some of these questions. Some of them were somewhat hit on before, but I do want to hit on this sort of longer one from Sean. Essentially how we can deploy Pieces OS, kind of build on Pieces applications in the cloud, essentially, is the question. And maybe Savi, you want to hit on that? I know right now, just speaking currently, you obviously have to have Pieces OS running. It's got to be local, but that is definitely on the horizon for us.
Yeah, definitely on the horizon. You know, there's a lot of considerations when you think about Pieces OS running on a remote environment, the scalability of it, the processing, you know, all of that. But that said, like when you use, you know, cloud features inside of Pieces, right? You go sign in, you connect your domain, savo.pieces.cloud, whatever else. It is an internal core of Pieces OS running in a Docker container, actually on a Cloud Run instance inside of GCP. So we will be able to get there very quickly. I think a lot of the work we're doing around HTTP versus gRPC is important, right? And so, we're moving large levels of payloads like across the wire, and we want those to be fast. We want those to be real time and so on. And so, I think that we will start to release a cloud server probably in Q3, maybe Q4, which is basically an engine that's designed for that type of execution, right? And even if the cloud server is running with gRPC, we'll be able to upgrade HTTP requests into gRPC requests using like an Envoy sidecar. So it should be, fully compatible with the existing API. So we're getting there, but yeah, you're spot on, right? It's Docker is the intuition there. If it has compute, a file system, and some memory on your device, we give it the same thing in the cloud, and it knows what's up for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to bring this one up as well. So just integrating into IntelliJ, absolutely. I sent a link in the chat to our docs for JetBrains. But in the future, maybe you won't even have to use the IntelliJ. Obviously, we have some like deep native integrations for each platform that we're integrated into, like we were showing with our Visual Studio plugin. But if you're just looking for that kind of overarching high level overview of your workflow, you might not even need it in the future. So
yeah, I definitely see that, and we'll wrap it here soon, but I definitely see a blended world where agents do work on behalf of you. And so there's the retrieval of your context, but then there's also the operation against your context, right? And so, for example, it can fully understand what I'm talking about in GChat, right? And it can say like, hey, you're talking to Robert about this, here's the link to the message, whatever else. That said, if I wanted to ask the Pieces Copilot and say, okay, great, can you let him know I'm working on this problem right now? Or can you summarize my workday and can you send it to Robert, right? Or something like that. Or could you report my infrastructure stand-up checklist for today and yesterday? That's where you need that integration so that the application itself, the Copilot, is able to call authenticated endpoints within GChat or within IntelliJ or whatever you're integrated with to do operations on your behalf, right? And so that'll be kind of a part 2 to this. But part 1 is having that context, being aware of it, and then part 2 is layering in what we call hardline integrations to kind of really make it bidirectional.
So I mean, on top of that, I mean, this also helps connect the different plugins and applications that you use. Right. So Pieces already does that to a certain extent, but we don't quite have the ability to say, hey, you were coding this, you had this error here, but then you talked about it in, GChat or Teams. Now that temporal grounding knows that across your entire workflow.
Yeah. And that's right. Like, for example, Robert is working on those GitHub profiles, right? And understanding like who was working on what. If you wanted to go to Pieces and you wanted to say, who was the last contributor that was working on, this recent bit of code, it needs that higher fidelity, information, right? It needs that actual context that is locked into Visual Studio. And so we combine that with the context seeing horizontally in a general sense to give you like those really, really detailed responses.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I wanted to thank all of our speakers today. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Robert, Jason, Savo. Thank you for watching this. This was amazing. And we hope to keep going these, once a month. Stay tuned because we do Twitter Spaces as well weekly, right around this time. But we decided to slide in a live stream instead. But yeah, thank you again. This has been amazing. And we'll catch you next time. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Jason.